Mandy is the new grindhouse-style revenge film starring Nicolas Cage and directed by Panos Cosmatos. And so, Nate, this is a very small release, and let's just start with Nicolas Cage in this movie.
Yeah, why not?
Hit or miss. A lot more misses lately.
Way more misses.
But every once in a while, every few years, he has a really good movie like Joe, I was thinking of from a few years
Joe
back.
was really good.
Yeah, really good movie.
Kick-Ass.
He was really good at, exactly, his part in Kick-Ass. So even though he's kind of famous now for being in all these bad, low-budget movies, every once in a while we get a gem from him. And this one looked promising.
It did.
You did this was during your trailer hiatus, so you did not see any trailers for it. You walked into this movie completely blind. I was a little bit intrigued from the trailer.
Me too.
But let's just talk about Nicolas Cage. And what did you think of his performance in this one?
Honestly, my problems with this movie does not lie with Nicolas Cage whatsoever. I think that Nicolas Cage did a great job in here. He's very minimalist for the most part with this. He's very reserved. I believed who he was for the most part in this. There's some Nicolas Cage freak-out moments. There is some spaz.
He's got to scream at some point.
He does, and that's just... I wonder if Nicolas Cage, do they write Nicolas Cage's role to be like this, or do they find him because the character calls for it? I don't know, but it seems like the criteria for Nicolas Cage lately is for him to spaz out and scream.
I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that the writer wrote the role with Nicolas Cage in mind.
With Nicolas Cage in mind, which makes sense. I think that he does fit this role, and personally, I did enjoy watching Nicolas Cage on screen. It has been a long time since I've seen a movie with Nicolas Cage in it, so it was nice to see him there. So I had no problems with Nicolas Cage. What about you?
Yeah, I actually enjoyed his performance. I think you're right. It was very subtle, and there were some extreme moments, but the extreme moments came after this extreme event happened to him.
Yeah.
So it's kind of fitting. And his character was starting to lose his mind at that point.
Right.
So it makes sense for him.
Point
right. It made sense for him to get, very loud and exaggerated like that. And I agree with you. Any problems I do have with this movie don't lie with Nicolas Cage. I will say this movie is very stylistic.
It's so stylistic.
It takes place in 1983, and one thing I can appreciate about this movie is that it takes place in 1983, and it looks like it was made in 1983.
This movie is just littered with colors. This is just a very, very colorful movie, and each scene almost seems to have its own color palette to give to the mood of what's going on in the situation. So I think it was utilized to its advantage, giving that 80s aesthetic and everything, but the style started to overtake the substance a little bit, where if they could have, gripped me a little bit more with the plot and the dialogue, the style wouldn't, have taken over so much. After a while, I was like, all right, I get it. You're stylistic. Can we get going here?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that the style does overshadow the substance of this. Not only is there minimalist dialogue in this movie, there's a minimalist plot. I mean, these people come, kill the man's woman, he goes on revenge rampage. It's very simple. And there are these there's these weird things in this movie that go without explanation. I mean, the woman is killed by a cult, and the cult is clearly hey, it's Charles Manson. The references
There's
and
a
similarities.
leader, and they're all followers.
The references and similarities are definitely there.
Yeah.
But just there's these weird creatures, I guess, in this kind of I don't know if they're demons, are they creatures, are they aliens? Like I said, it just, you get no explanation.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that there are enough clues and hints there to warrant a discussion. Well, what are they? I think it's this, you think it's that kind of thing. I just think it's too vague.
Very vague. A lot was being thrown at the wall here, I think, and I don't think a lot of it stuck. You're right. There's these I call them horsemen, only they're on bikes, kind of. These creature horsemen that come, that are summoned if you need a favor that they owe you or that you can get out of them. But I noticed that there were scenes that not only lasted really, really long, they were completely unnecessary, and they never really paid off in the end.
The pacing of this movie definitely leaves a lot to be desired. Not only with scene and plot pacing, just with shots. There were so many shots that lingered, and I'm just all right, let's move on. And then there were some shots that just lingered on for a long time, and I'm what? It didn't lead to anything.
Right.
You ended the scene with that. That was your transition, was this really long shot. And I didn't get the feeling it's, it's to heighten his loneliness with this long shot. It wasn't effective. So, and there's this one scene where the woman is clearly underneath the influence of hallucinogens. And what they were able to do with the scene stylistically was cool, but it totally wore out its welcome. We're at the point where I'm
right.
all right, can we just get going
Yeah,
with this?
I'm not even listening to what he's saying anymore.
Exactly.
After a while.
Yep. I was just completely lost interest.
Yeah, so that's what I think this movie had a lot of. It also does chapters. It does like, you don't even see the title of Mandy until the final chapter.
Right.
You
And that's
know?
like an hour and 20 minutes in.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that, yeah, it just took a little bit too long to get to where it needed to go, and there was a lot of events that happened that didn't pay off into anything at all. So, having said that, that's a pretty big gripe with this film, but once it gets into it, did you enjoy it?
When it came to like him
The
starting his
revenge.
revenge rampage, yes, I did enjoy it. There were some like very gruesome, like grindhouse style deaths in this movie when he went around, killing people.
Yeah.
And you can tell there's all these little moments that are like throwbacks to some of the movies that inspired this. Like chainsaw heavy movie. I gotta think of Evil Dead when I think
Totally.
chainsaw of the 80s. There's a chainsaw fight. I'm like, okay, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. They
Yeah.
had a chainsaw fight.
Yeah.
And like kind of like over the top weapons and moments.
Yeah.
It's just I wish they would have leaned into that throughout the entire movie. Maybe that would have sped it up a little bit.
Yeah.
But I just think that like once they got there, it was good. But man, it took too long to get there.
Yeah, it felt like they were sort of pushing the themes of the cult on the audience a little bit more. Like we were supposed to sympathize with them, or we were supposed to learn what they were all
Come
about.
to a point of understanding. at
Yeah,
least.
and you just
Yeah.
never do. I think that the actor which is this actor, I can't believe he did this role. That was the leader of the cult.
Thomas Wayne from Batman Begins.
Yeah, he's Thomas Wayne from Batman Begins. Like, dude, bold choice on doing this one.
Yeah.
And it's not that he did a bad job with it. I
No.
think he did a pretty good job with it. It just could have been wrapped up so much tighter than this. This movie is 2 hours and 5 minutes long, and it could have been a swift hour and 25 minutes, hour and a half, and I would have been much more satisfied with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do commend Linus Roach, the actor who plays the head of the cult, for going there and taking risks. And there are a lot of creative risks that they take with this movie, which I can commend just for whether it pays off or not. Take a risk, try something different. So I do commend them from that. Even though with all the risks they take, I can't say all of them paid off or were the right choice. But I do commend them for at least being risky and trying something new.
Buffs.
All right, so we saw Mandy. We talked about it. Is this the return of Nicolas Cage? Was this a good Nicolas Cage movie? Give us your recommendation.
I can't say this is the return of Nicolas Cage, but this is a quality performance from him, and I think that with the risks this movie takes, it just goes a little too weird, a little too extreme in some places. Like it's intense for just being intense sake. Mm-hmm. So I would give it a skip it. If you're into like the 80s grindhouse kind of thing, if you're into these like old school horror movies, then yeah, I would say check it out for the most part. I wouldn't recommend this to a mainstream audience.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think that there were parts of this movie that I enjoyed and really admired, actually. There were some good choices made here, but a lot of bad choices. I feel like this is a movie that really can gain some cult following throughout the years. I think that it will start being looked at as influential, maybe, at some points. But I am going to say skip it. But this is only for a demographic, a certain demographic. I'm assuming that there's probably going to be about 80% of people that will be like, I don't understand this, I don't want to see it, it's really weird, it takes too long. And then there's probably a good 20-25% of people that will be like, this is awesome, this is the grindhouse stuff I want. So it's not that it goes without a recommendation, but for the most part, I'm going to say skip it.
Buffs.
All right, so that's it for our review of Mandy. Not only is this available in theaters, but it is available on video on demand. So go ahead, check it out, let us know what you think, and leave a comment down below.
Next week, we'll be bringing you our review of Burn After Reading, which is our Diamond Anniversary review for September. I can't believe it's been 10 years since that movie came out. But
Oh yeah, with Ballad of Buster Scruggs right around the corner, I'm excited to watch a Coen Brothers movie.
yeah, me too. So we'll bring you that review next week. But wherever you are, whoever you're with,
Watch more movies.